Hi and welcome back to SGTV. We're back here with Karen Boom. Karen, we're going to be talking about changes in the industry. So it's an ever-changing industry, but what sort of obstacles do you face in your job where you think maybe changes are going too far or changes that you feel might be necessary?
Well, there are lots of changes happening all the time, which is one of the things that is good about the job because it doesn't stay the same. Obviously, a hot topic at the moment is the whole electric vehicle charging marketplace, which is it's an interesting one because it's obviously a completely new section in the 18th edition. So it's something that electricians in general have to be aware of, and they have to know what the current regulations are. And there's a number of reasons for that. One is because you might get involved in actually having to install it. Also, you're possibly going to be having to get involved with inspecting and testing it. So if you don't understand what the regulations are, you're not going to be able to do that. One of the big things that I think is massively challenging for the general public at the moment is that there's a lack of communication between the car manufacturers, salespeople, and the consumer. Not all electric vehicles are the same. Obviously, you've got the true electric vehicles, which are purely electric, like the Tesla. Then you've got hybrids, which have got a battery, but they also do take fuel. And the battery can be charged via electric. It can also, and does also charge, depending on what speed you're going, by the actual car itself. And there's obviously a massive difference between a high-powered charger, which takes 20 minutes, for example, such as the things that we're seeing in supermarkets and petrol stations. And then you've also got the trickle chargers or granny chargers, which you apparently can plug into a 13-amp socket. Well, what people don't understand is that some of those trickle chargers, they take the same, or they draw the same as, let's say, a kettle. So people say, well, it's only the same as a kettle, I can put that on a 13-amp plug top, so why can't I just plug that into any old socket? But the kettle is a short point load, so you plug the kettle in, you switch it on, it boils, takes a minute, and then it's off until another couple of hours when you might boil it again. But plugging your car in overnight means that you're going to be pulling that for several hours. So unless you've got the right cable to deal with the current carrying capacity, you could be in potential, dangerous situation depending on what that socket is fed from. It could be fed from another socket, from another socket, from another socket, or from this extension lead to that extension lead to that extension lead, which is another thing that I've seen. And the public are being, in my opinion, misinformed or not really understanding what they're buying into.
Yeah. So you feel that there should definitely be some better information available?
Yeah.
Probably from your purchasing point of view at the point you buy the car.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But also loading in general is not something that most of the public understand.
No.
They don't really understand about, how many kilowatts an appliance is, and therefore it needs different, consideration to your lighting circuit, for example. This is where it becomes difficult sometimes for us to do our job, because people say, you're just trying to sell me a new fuse board, I just want a socket. And well, I'm not really trying to do that. What I'm trying to do is make your socket comply with the regulations, because the other thing that people don't understand is that we have to comply with manufacturer's instructions. So when I go to a car charging scenario where Mitsubishi have stated that any socket that's to be used to charge this car has to be on a dedicated circuit back to a fuse board, has to be a certain cable size, it has to be a certain RCD type, it has to have surge protection. And if I don't comply with all of that, that battery warranty could be invalidated.
Yeah,
and then it's going to be on my insurance. I'm not going to be able to claim on my insurance because I didn't follow the regulations.
Yeah, and I suppose for a customer, that could be, you could understand why they might think you're trying to pull the trousers down or something when all they want is a socket to charge their car, when actually what you're trying to do is make sure their house and they are safe.
And the other thing that I have to consider is what's already in that electrical installation. So you, for example, could have a 60 amp service head in your home. You might already have an induction hob and a hot tub, you know, and you might already have electric heating. If I'm going to come along and install you a 7 kilowatt car charger, you're not going to be able to charge your car, make your toast and boil a kettle at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's a really big consideration, added to which, you know, how are we all going to be able to physically, I mean, I live in a cul-de-sac and there are 3 cars in my household. There's no way that I could have 3 cars charging at the same time, or even have them in the proximity that would reach my house for them to charge at the same time. So it's all a bit, it's quite...
bit of a minefield at the minute.
Yeah.
Yeah. One thing I've been told as well from various installers is that they're obviously looking to the future. They can see that electric vehicle charging is going to be a big thing at some point. So they're trying to get on top of that, you know, now, and they're doing courses and training to enable them to do that. But then what they're finding is through different schemes where they're having to claim money back from, say, the government, or what's the there's a OLEF, sorry, that they're not getting that money back for weeks, months, and then they're almost thinking, hang on, why am I doing this?
Absolutely. So there's a number of things to consider there. One is that OLEV is not very efficient. I've heard of lots of claims being rejected because tick boxes haven't been filled in properly. So then that goes to the back of the queue. You can't communicate with them easily. And there's, I think, around an 11-week wait time at the moment. So if you're a self-employed electrician, it can be very costly. You can have a lot of money tied up in claims that you're waiting to be settled. Plus the fact that having done the course myself, I came away drawing the conclusion that there's a lot of paperwork. So again, I have to come out and do an assessment, have to consider the current installation. In some cases, I'll need to notify the DNO that I'm going to put this car charger in, and I have to get permission to do that. In some cases, your service head will have to be increased in size, so I have to wait for that to happen. Then I've got to actually come and do the work. Then I've got to issue a certificate for the work, and I've got to fill in the OLEV paperwork. So I'm reckoning, how is that going to be cost effective for me? Because there are lots of companies that are set up just to do electric vehicle charging points, and they're going to be much more competitive than I am.
How do you think that could be streamlined? I mean, if it is going to be such a big thing going forward, you know, for people like you who are looking at it thinking, at the moment, in its current state, it's not worth my time. So what do you think could be done to change that?
I really don't know. It's almost like it needs to be, you know, more thought about. One of the things that I don't understand is why do we as the electrician have to suffer the £500? Why isn't that taken out at the point of sale when the vehicle is sold to the customer? You know, and the other thing is, of course, that there is another thing to consider in this whole electric vehicle charging thing is, at this moment in time, in order to meet the government target with regard to renewable energy, there's not really enough skilled tradespeople out there at the moment.
There's quite a big trade shortage, isn't there?
Massive. So unfortunately, I can see that what will probably happen is the same with the meter installations. You know, a lot of the energy providers are going around installing smart meters. The people on the ground installing the smart meters are not electricians, they're technicians. And I can see that in order to meet these targets, you're going to end up with a new course that will just be electric vehicle charging technician, and the people will just be doing that.
Yeah. There's certain changes for Amendment 1 with regards to earthing as well, isn't there? Which also links to the electric charging. And from what I understand, again, that it can be quite daunting and not necessarily clear information out there at this point.
It is a bit of a minefield because nothing is standard. So the charges that we're seeing vary massively in spec and technology that's actually contained within that unit. So there are chargers that are on the market where, yes, you're going to need to put an earth rod in the ground because it can't share the earth of the existing installation. But then there are also other chargers that are out there that have got some magic technology that makes it that you don't have to have an earth rod.
Yeah.
And for us on the ground, dealing with this day in, day out, it is very challenging to know what currently is in what state of spec and what currently isn't. And yeah, it is hugely, it's challenging.
Yeah.
Which is why I'm not doing it at the moment. I've kind of like sat there and looked at my business model and thought, I don't really need to, I've got enough other work to do where I don't need to be getting involved in that.
Wait and see if it
I'm
streamlines a bit.
Yeah.
I would like to mention as well, just for our audience out there, Unicrimp, which is part of the Scolmore group, they do a range of earth rods which are available. So we'll put a link in the description, which will be in the video here. Just want to go back actually to smart meters. It's not something I've really spoken to many people about. As you said, we're getting technicians installing them, but as it stands, electricians like yourself aren't installing them.
Well, we can, we could, but it's not something that as an electrician you'd recommend to somebody. It's something that the energy providers are encouraging people to put in, and there's a number of reasons and a number of conspiracy theories that are linked to smart meters. So one is, obviously, it enables you as the homeowner to gauge far more accurately how much energy certain things,
It's like if you're leaving your phone charger plugged in.
Yeah, you leave your phone charger plugged in, or you've got all the lights on in the house, and then suddenly you go around every room and turn it all off, and your energy use goes down. You're like, oh, that's brilliant. Obviously, that's a saving. A lot of people, again, they don't understand about loading, so they're not really aware that, where they're leaving 20 of their halogen downlights on in a kitchen, really how many watts that's consuming. So there's that. What it also enables people to be billed more accurately, because historically we've done direct debit, haven't we? And the energy provider has estimated your usage.
Yeah, that drives me crazy.
And then you'll pay that. And sometimes
that
that means that the energy company is sitting on a lot of your money. And sometimes it actually means that they didn't estimate it properly and you owe them a lot of money. So the smart meters, they do allow people to see far more transparently how much energy they're using, how much that's costing them.
As it stands at the minute though, you're not able to, you're given a smart meter from an energy provider, but that means if you want to go switch to another provider, you've got to get someone in to remove that meter, put in a new meter, and it's almost locking you into one provider really, isn't it? Definitely.
And also I do get quite a lot of calls where things have gone wrong after a meter has been fitted. One of the reasons for that is, they'll isolate your supply, then they'll fit the meter, and then they just energise it, which causes a surge. Because obviously what you should do is go to the fuse board, turn everything off, then turn everything back on, one circuit at a time, to avoid that. And where we've got surges, that can damage equipment in people's homes in the same way that will happen if you live in an area where you encounter voltage fluctuations or lots of power cuts. But the other thing is about the smart meters is that with regard to the electric vehicle charging, the smart meter is going to be used to monitor energy in certain areas. And there is a theory out there, I don't know how true it is, that sometimes the amount of energy you're allowed to have coming into your home can be restricted depending on the demand and the grid in your area. Okay. And that's one of the ways that they'll be able to monitor it and apparently allow for adjustments in that.
Yeah. One thing I was told, and it could be a bit of a hearsay conspiracy thing, was that they're almost rigged so that it might say you're only using X amount, but you might be getting charged a slightly higher amount. Again, I don't know if that's true, but I suppose you're at the hands of whoever's giving you that meter. So
Yeah.
my next point of that was, do you think that your wholesalers and manufacturers are going to be producing something, their own kind of meter that is easily accessible for electricians just to pick up from their local wholesaler and install, to make things a little bit more transparent for their customers?
I honestly don't know. It would depend on whether there's a demand for that from the public. And at this moment in time, the public are, again, it's not something, we're not really taught in school how to understand loading. In the same way that there's so many different tariffs. So, for example, depending on what tariff you're on, will depend on how much you pay for your nighttime electricity, how much you pay for your daytime electricity. And that's going to be interesting, especially with the electric vehicle charging. I don't know whether Economy 7 even exists anymore. It does for people who've got like storage heaters and things like that. But
I had the pleasure of that at one point. Yeah.
But you will pay more
Yeah.
for your daytime electricity when you're on an Economy 7 tariff, which sometimes makes it a bit of a false economy, depending on what you're plugging in during the day. So it's just, yeah.
I suppose
challenging.
It's challenging for installers and for customers, and really it's down to information, isn't it? Whether that's, I don't know, coming in from television, from simple adverts where they're just giving you a basic explanation of what does what. I don't know. I don't suppose any of us do at this point, but it's definitely something that needs clearing up for everyone out there, really.
But again, it's like information overload, isn't it? Like,
That's it, yeah.
If you really want to know, you'll go and find that information out. But if I think, unfortunately, we live in a bit of a society where everybody is cash rich and time poor. So they're like, oh, it goes out by direct debit, I don't need to understand it because I haven't got time. And it's not until, it really starts to affect people's lives. Like if I told you, that you might have a 100 amp service head, but you're only going to be allowed to use 30 amps between the hours of 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. Again, that's kind of a loss of control for people, isn't it? So easy at that point that they're going to say, oh, hang on a minute, I need to understand this a bit more because I want to do something about it.
Possibly, yeah.
So leading on as well about changes in legislation and keeping up to date with things. There's also some new legislation coming in soon with regards to the private rental sector and electrical installation condition reports. So it's now going to be mandatory for landlords to have a report done as a minimum of every 5 years. It's always been a recommendation, but it's never really been enforced. So this is great because hopefully it will be, be a lot safer to be a tenant in the private rental sector. However, that safety will only be great if the electrician carrying out the EICR does a proper and thorough job of it. So there's always been a bit of controversy around companies that are specifically set up to do just EICRs and how many they can get done in a day, because obviously they're paid per certificate.
So to a point where it's quantity over quality.
Yes, absolutely. I personally feel, and I know there's a lot of other sparkies out there on social media that feel that as a minimum, so let's take a typical 3-bedroom semi-detached house. Obviously, you're going to have to get to the property. You're going to do a certain percentage of sampling of, outlets, lights. You're going to want to have the cover off a fuse board. You're going to be doing some testing in the fuse board. You're going to be doing some testing of the whole electrical installation. That's a minimum of 3-4 hours. And then you've got to go and actually produce the report, which again is a minimum of a couple of hours. So you're talking a day. And there are companies out there, and I know because it's happened to me, it's happened to lots of other sparks that I know of, where companies are offering to carry out 10-way consumer unit, 3-bedroom property for £50, £60. I massively question with the quality or integrity of that certificate, because there's just no way that you could have done all of that testing and inspecting and filled the report in correctly for £60.
Yeah, and you think that's just pressure to
It's pressure.
get more done rather than actually focus on what needs doing.
Yes, and unfortunately, this is another thing about the industry that I think it's going to have to change, is that there's no electric police. So the certificate is, for any layperson looking at it, incredibly confusing, and uses a lot of jargon and terminology that, as a layperson, you would never be able to understand. In the same way that, if you take your car into a garage, they could bamboozle you with terminology and jargon and tell you it was going to be £300, and you wouldn't have the knowledge or experience to be able to challenge that. And so, it just opens the floodgates for a lot of shoddy workmanship, dodgy certificates, and it brings the whole industry down as a whole when companies are set up to offer ridiculous prices for work that's unrealistic, which is a bit of a shame. So, we need to work to change that.
Something that definitely needs regulating, but also enforcing, more importantly.
Definitely, yeah. So I think what will probably happen is there'll be a new scheme or a new way of regulating that area of the sector, and to make sure that the electricians who are carrying out these inspections are A, doing it to a certain set of standards, and B, have the right qualifications to enable them to actually produce that certificate.
Yeah, and again, I suppose trying to sort of implement that and get some sort of body together to do that, it's another challenge in itself, really, isn't it?
It is another challenge in itself, because a lot of the schemes that are set up at the moment are for profit. So there definitely needs to be some kind of other way of registering electricians, regulating electricians, inspecting the work that these people are doing. And change is afoot. There are lots of conversations that I know are going on in lots of different bodies, that will hopefully see within the next few years things will hopefully be raising up the standards.
Yeah, anyone out there watching, I hope you found that useful, and I just want to thank you, Karen, again for coming on the show, and we'll see you guys next time.